Here on Tuesday, December 14th, 2021 at the Athens-Clarke County City Hall, and we have an exciting double stack of meetings this evening in the interest of a little bit of time off for the public and for the members of this body. We have both a work session and our normally scheduled agenda setting session with a special called session for approval of a couple of items today. Here we're just after 4 o'clock getting ready with our work session, and then at 6 o'clock we'll have that special called session and our agenda setting meeting. And here on our work session agenda, we just have 2 items. We'll be talking about fleet replacement and fire apparatus planning. And so hearing from Gavin Hassemer at Central Services and Nate Moss at the Fire Department. And then we'll be talking about TSPLOST 2023 with Lauren Blais, Chair of the TSPLOST Advisory Committee. So Manager Williams, if you'd like to say a few words of introduction, we'll go ahead and get rolling.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, this is an important purchase for us with some very necessary fire apparatus, but it's also indicative of some budgetary challenges we have with our fleet fund. And Gavin Hassemer is here to tell us about the broader issues and the specific upcoming purchase, along with Captain Moss as well. So go ahead, Gavin.
All right. Thank you, and it's certainly a pleasure to see everyone in person tonight. Thank you for making time for us this afternoon for a topic we all know is important to the community. Myself, along with Captain Moss, would like to discuss some of the continued challenges that we face in fleet funding, and especially as it relates to fire apparatus. This evening, in agenda setting, you'll actually be considering approval of a new rescue truck, which is really the first in a sequence of upcoming purchases over the next few years for fire and emergency services. Unfortunately, none of this equipment comes at a low cost. And so, using the rescue truck replacement for this evening, we'd also like to discuss challenges in fleet replacement in general, from both a high level as well as some of the solutions we think are possible to solve the problem. In our general outline for this afternoon, we'll briefly talk about the history and challenges that have faced the fleet program, as well as our fire apparatus, the number of equipment that we have, and what we're looking to possibly replace over the next few years. We'll also discuss how that may or may not affect our ISO rating, not necessarily the equipment itself, but the use of the equipment in firefighting and how that relates to how we tackle some of those issues. We'll update our financial forecasts based on all this information, especially as it relates to the past 2 years and the pandemic, as well as those possible solutions and next steps. So just a brief history. As many of you are aware and have likely heard before, we remain at a critical point in how we fund our fleet, and not just from a fire apparatus standpoint. To the left, you'll certainly see a couple highlights in recent history, but the gist of it is that the program has experienced underfunding for quite some time, from both a capital and a SPLOST standpoint. We've made attempts for funding through other mechanisms that are also listed there, but have been unsuccessful with those awards. When you couple that with the economy that we currently face and some of the procurement challenges, for example, price escalation, it just has a compounding effect on our fleet replacement program. We have experienced industry-wide cost impacts from not only material, but also labor. We're facing timing and logistical issues with our build times and delivery, and also the increased demand, not only nationwide, but also from our local government. Unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, us, like everyone else, took a pause, didn't want to go ahead and start spending money with the unknown future that we faced. As things progressed over the 2 years and more funding became available, especially from federal funding sources, all of a sudden the floodgates opened nationwide and everybody's ordering trucks at this point. And so we face that competition as well. Unfortunately, that pause caused a significant deferral in the number of vehicles that we have replaced over the years. And so what we've had to do is keep an active list, and that list has kept growing. And we are unfortunately at a critical point in our life cycles for some vehicles, especially fire apparatus, that is coming close to a breaking point. And what I'll do is I'll sort of turn this over to Captain Moss for a couple slides to let you learn in specifics about some of our fire apparatus.
Thank you, Gavin. And I just wanted to relate to everyone that it's such a privilege to be here, represent the fire department, and to see you all in person for the first time in a long time. So just really appreciate your time today. Well, I'm here to basically give a quick brief overview of some of the operations and some of the technical specifics of what we're here for today with this rescue truck and fleet replacement. As you can see, our current inventory includes 9 engines, 3 ladders, a hazmat truck, and as you can see pictured, this is one of our current rescue trucks that we're operating with out of Oglethorpe Avenue Station 4. We also have a tanker, mobile communications van, and a few other support vehicles. Well, in our previous operations, we were only capable of really responding to fires, vehicle extrication calls, and a few technical things, mostly high-angle rescue stuff that just required rope and stuff that was easy for us to transport. We also responded, of course, to medical calls, and we have grown in our technical capabilities as a department. Now we have at least 30 people in our department that are trained to higher levels of technical rescue specifications and the ability to be able to respond to things such as trench collapse, confined space rescues, things that require more technical training. It also requires more tools in order to be able to transport to an emergency scene. So you can see in our current and proposed rescue operations, we cover all of those things plus more, and we have the desire to be able to be self-sufficient, to be more comprehensive in our response. So we're not having to rely on multiple apparatus to get tools and equipment to an emergency scene. We would like to be able to do so with our rescue truck that we're proposing to get. One unique thing about the newer rescue truck versus the older model of doing business, so to speak, is the equipment that we would carry on it would be more environmentally friendly. As you can see with the part of the slide on the right, you see electric tools. Most of the stuff that we are proposing as far as tools for vehicle extrication, saws, fans, whatnot, all will be powered by a DeWalt battery, just like you would have in your own drill or screw gun at home, versus gas-powered, hydraulic fluid, things like that that would be a detriment to the environment. We also are proposing to have an idle mitigation equipment added to this, which basically would turn this apparatus into more of a hybrid. So when the vehicle is sitting idle, it doesn't have to keep the engine running in order for emergency lights and other things to run. This would all be run from lithium-ion batteries. As you can also see at the bottom, you can see the comparison in replacement costs. Though it is a little more expensive to go to the heavy rescue model that we're looking to go to, the savings per year, it adds up. It's going to be cheaper to maintain, and it'll get longer years of service. Another thing that we're considering also is our ISO rating. I know we're all very proud of our ISO 1 rating. And we know that that comes from the great people that work in emergency communications, our water department, and also our fire department. Well, the benefits to the county are quite monumental. For any business or resident looking to move in here, you get the lowest insurance rates around. Obviously, it's increasing the opportunity for economic development, and we are proud to be one of the safest communities in the Northeast Georgia area. Here we have comparisons. Now, these aren't specifically picked out departments. These are just the first to respond. We put a poll out to several departments in the Georgia area that are various ISO ratings, but some compared to us kind of in population size, others into capabilities as far as response. But you can see the life cycle here. Sandy Springs, Alpharetta, and Clayton County, Barrow, Macon, Hall County, and Augusta all have about a 8 to 10 year replacement cycle, whereas we currently are running 17 years on our frontline engines and 22 years on our frontline ladder trucks. Well, we're proposing, maybe in future considerations to consider the life cycle of these apparatus due to the fact that our call volume has increased dramatically. For example, back in 2010, we were running under 3,000 calls, about 2,800 calls. In 2020, we ran 7,540. This year, we're already at 7,874, and that was this morning at 8 o'clock. So we've already run several calls since then. So we're easily going to hit 8,000 calls per year from the fire department. So as you can imagine, these calls are a lot of wear and tear on our apparatus, a lot of stopping, starting, going, as fast as we can to respond, but obviously that catches up with the wear and tear on the vehicles. There's some downsides in addition to that for the extended life cycle. So when you think about your own personal vehicles, all of the safety implementation that has happened in the past 5 years, 10 years, backup cameras, collision avoidance, things like that, these are also available in fire apparatus. And this is something that we're looking to purchase, and we already are purchasing with some of our newer apparatus that keeps our people safe, and it reduces liability for the county, for the department, and it more importantly keeps our community saved. When you have the operations of fire apparatus for an extended period of time, you have to worry about repairs. And as repairs start to add up over time due to, increased expenses for the repairs, also the number of repairs that we have in our vehicle maintenance shop may grow exponentially the longer we keep an apparatus in the front line. A unique way of looking at things too is from the environmental impact. And people don't necessarily equate fire apparatus and environmental impact, but if you think about it, the older apparatus that we have, if it's 20 years old, just think of the pollutants that truck is putting out versus one that has upgraded emission standards and things that help refine the emissions of that apparatus. Also, you have just the stuff that leaks out of the bottom of a truck, oil, transmission fluid, things of that nature. You can imagine a small car versus a large fire apparatus, the big difference that it could have. We also will have fewer opportunities for alternative fuels or for other ways of saving the wear and tear on a vehicle, such as the idle mitigation that we mentioned earlier, by holding on to this apparatus for an extended period of time. Well, at this point, I'll turn it back over to Gavin. Thank you so much.
So as I stated earlier, we've updated our forecasts and can provide the following comparisons. Please keep in mind that this is only for fire and emergency services vehicles. This is not a comparison of our entire fleet. What you see is top is pre-pandemic, the bottom is post-pandemic, and considering that there hasn't been a change in funding sources, the only real change that you see is the expenses. The expenses have increased from the beginning of the pandemic, and that is due to not only rising prices in the economy, but also it reflects some of those deferred vehicles that we unfortunately had to postpone purchase on. How that relates to our financial position, unfortunately, over the next 7 to 8 years, what you see on the bottom is a $3.25 million deficit forecast that the fire apparatus alone will face. This includes not only the potential purchase of the rescue vehicle that is on the agenda setting for this evening, but later on, in a few months, a ladder truck, as well as in the next 2 to 3 years, 4 engines and a hazmat vehicle. The other thing I'd like to point out that you see here is not only the deficit, but the bottom compared to the top in terms of the years that it takes to recover. Not only did we increase the amount of money, we increased the recovery time. And again, 10 years from now, we're going to sort of face this this revolution again. And so that last peak towards the end of each one of the graphs has also shrunk in terms of the potential funding that we'll have available to begin FY32. You'll see that it went down from about 3.75 million to about 2.5 million. And again, in 10 years, we anticipate having a cycle of significant purchases at that time. So as far as solutions, we've come up with a few funding options that you see on the left-hand side. We've indicated how they relate to the fleet in general, as well as their suitability for fire and emergency services, and then lastly, how they would apply to the potential for the rescue truck. The unfortunate thing is that the rescue truck is sort of far along and in a good need in the process, and so not a lot of options are available in particular for the rescue truck, but we certainly look forward to your feedback on the future purchases that we have and how our rating system could potentially align with your ideas on funding. The metric behind this is essentially we considered a combination of speed in terms of the procurement process, as well as the financial impact on Athens-Clarke County, and operationally how it would impact Athens-Clarke County as well. So if you have any questions later on about that, we'd be happy to answer those. As far as next steps, we would certainly look for your approval next month on the rescue truck agenda, and we are actively engaged in the FY23 budgeting process, as you're aware. We will be coming in March, likely with the ladder truck RFP. And in June, of course, we look to approve a budget. And so between now and then, we know we have a good amount of work to do on our side, and we'll look for any guidance from you as the commission that you see fit. But otherwise, we again appreciate the time this afternoon and look forward to working with you on deciding the best path forward. And we'll be happy to answer any questions, but I know you also have a presentation afterward, and we'll take any emails as well. So thank you all.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks, Captain Moss. Any questions from commissioners about sort of what you've seen and where we are? Patrick?
This is just to Gavin. Are you still with the planning department?
I've moved over to Central Services.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank
Okay. So I fully support this, and hopefully we get the funding. Can you go to slide number 10? So
Number 10, you said, sir?
on ours, it's 10, the fire. So the big dip in FY25 is the purchase of the ladder trucks and the fire trucks, correct?
Well, the ladder truck, we're going to look to purchase in FY, either a combination of FY22 and 23. The big dip that you see in FY25 is likely those 4 fire engines as well as the hazmat.
Okay. So without just looking at the budget, because that's a huge dip, what would it take for our fire department to get a budget that will level that off? Because I'm just looking at some of the things, like the FEMA grant is, we may get the grant, we may not get the grant, and, we have to decide on ARPA funds, and, that's limited. But just for fiscal sustainability for the long term, for at least the next 10 years, 20 years down the road, when these trucks and the apparatus, go get old and need to be replaced, what would the fire department need to make that line more flat?
Sure, and I agree. If we are awarded the FEMA grant, that would actually only apply to the ladder truck purchase alone. It would not apply to any of those future purchases in FY25 unless we were, seeking another grant separate from that. But facing the $3.25 million deficit, essentially pre-pandemic, we needed about $900,000 a year for fire apparatus alone in funding. Currently, we average about $320,000 per year in SPLOST funding. And in FY20 and FY21, from a capital standpoint, we did not receive any funds for fire apparatus. And so last year, the commission agreed to set us on a path forward. It wasn't to the full extent that we necessarily needed. We did only receive about $300,000 in FY22 operations funding. So realistically, the funding must also grow almost 30% every year for the next 4 fiscal years to maintain some functionality in our public safety fleet. Essentially, we're going to be looking for roughly $2 million at least in the next budget to try and get us back on track.
My last question, so we just got this awesome ISO rating with some of these fleets and some of these apparatus getting old. Would that affect our ISO rating?
I'll let Captain Moss maybe answer that question a little bit better.
The danger would probably be down the road as apparatus. What we typically do when we take an apparatus, say a ladder truck, and it's taken off the front line, it's then placed in reserve status for a few years. The danger is when we start losing frontline or reserve apparatus, that can affect our ISO rating. So over time, yes, sir, that could exactly be the concern.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Jesse, Mike?
Sure. I have a quick question, Gavin, and appreciate y'all being here. So you're saying you're asking for $2 million. Now, I mean, the commission could very well look at our SPLOST tiering, and if we're just giving them $300,000 a year, we could change that to meet that $2 million projection, could we not?
You could advance funds to take care of the short-term issue, but it's a longer-term issue.
Right.
And I would also add, Commissioners Davenport and Hamby, you know, part of the problem with our fleet replacement, we do try and level out the spikes in capital so you don't have these high and low budget years. You know, it's compounded by that we've underfunded, and not just recently, but, you know, 10 years ago, there was some underfunding of fleet. You might remember a couple of years ago where we said, well, let's get on a 5 or 10 year path to get back on track. And then when y'all did put some funds in the SPLOST, that's when we said, well, these years we won't put into it. But since then, escalation's gone up. The other thing that creates the red, you know, lake here is that we just got this, you know, clump of trucks coming due all at one time. And so we're facing a lot of different compounding issues there. But you could, Commissioner Hamby, you could advance the SPLOST funds to avert this, but it's going to create, you know, the issue a little further down the road.
Well, I guess I'm just saying if we're hearing there's a sense of urgency, we might need to look at doing that.
Well, one reason, this was a great illustration to talk about it, I think in terms of the upcoming budget and how, you know, as y'all decide the priorities and everything, that this will be one of those things we need to talk about. So we put it on the table early.
Justin?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for putting this together. This is a wonderful elaboration from the discussion we had a little bit of at a retreat, and also just really good to see your faces. Nice to not be in two-dimensional space. A couple questions about the slides. I think it was slide 7. I'm curious why those communities were chosen. I mean, obviously there's a lot around Georgia, but why are those the two that we're comparing to?
No, that's an excellent question. Actually, those two were not solely chosen for any particular reason. They were the first two to respond by the time we had to have the slide put together.
Okay.
We put together, let's see, we had 7, 8 communities that we reached out to, and by and large, there was an 8 to 10 year replacement cycle for all of them. So I didn't see the point of us changing the slides specifically there was no changes to the actual numbers, but there was no real singled out reason for those communities.
Okay, so even as we've heard from more and more communities, it seems like we're kind of the outlier in terms of our
We are, and
replacement cycle.
typically, I think it's because of our escalation in call volume over the past 10 years. Some of these other communities were already running a higher number of calls. So
Okay.
the volume probably is what dictated their life cycle.
Okay. And then, I guess related to that escalation in call volume, I'm curious what you attribute that to. I know that a little over half of the calls that the fire department responds to are medical related. Is that largely what
Yes,
we
sir.
can attribute it to?
That absolutely is a large part of it, yes, sir.
Okay. And then for the next slide, I'm just curious, the downsides of the longer life cycle. I guess what I'm hearing is replacing them sooner doesn't mean they're going to be in any better condition. They're just wearing down sooner. So maybe this question is moot, but is there a chance that we'd fetch any kind of better price with more recent vehicles?
There is
being
a
auctioned
better
off?
chance, just to be honest. I mean, Gavin can probably address the actual numbers a little better, but we're not getting anything for the apparatus that we are trying to sell on auction.
Is there any chance that would meaningfully offset the costs at all, or is that a pretty negligible amount that we can expect to get?
I would say we can't rely on it, just because of the fact that when you're looking at, a $500,000 to $1 million purchase, the return on it is going to be maybe 10 to 20%, if that, if we're lucky.
And then,
And one thing, if you don't mind, sir, just to elaborate on that from an operational point of view, I think one of the tangible things that we're seeing now is the cost for repairs for our existing apparatus. So, for instance, we just had to replace a better part of an engine for a ladder truck. That kind of stuff is what adds up, and when you have a truck that's over 20 years old, that's where we're running into some issues as far as the tangible things.
okay. And then just last question for now, regarding the ARP money that's mentioned as like potential solutions, is that just referring to the general bucket of ARP money that we have available to us, or are there any specific buckets out there that we can apply for that might apply to public safety vehicles?
This would be the money that we have in hand now.
Okay, thanks.
Did you have a question?
I did, but I think I'm gonna pass. Thank you.
Okay. Melissa and then Tim.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I came in late, so I might have missed any discussion of this. But at the retreat, I brought up the possibility of charging a fire services fee, kind of based on scale of buildings, because this most expensive equipment is the equipment is specific to these high-rise structures. And I know other cities do it, other cities in Georgia do it. This would also be a way for us to be able to get some compensation from UGA, which is the driver of these larger buildings. Could staff have any response to that?
Well, at the retreat, that's a policy issue that the commission can talk about. If that, for instance, gets discussed in committee and you ask staff's directed through the manager to look up how those things might be done, we'd be willing to do that. But until we get direction from the commission, the consensus of the commission, we wait for further direction.
Well, I would ask the mayor if he could please assign that to committee. I believe that there is a great deal of interest on this commission. I believe there'd be a great deal of interest in our community, because our community is bearing the burden of these increased costs and this need for really expensive equipment, when most folks, live in homes that don't need a ladder truck if they have a kitchen fire. And this would be a way of assuring that the University of Georgia does pay their fair share when it comes to contributing to our emergency services needs.
So, Commissioner, as mentioned at the meeting a week ago, what you'll be seeing in the next week is that collection of committee requests, and so I'll be asking you to prioritize those. And obviously, if this rises to the top, this would ideally be in GOC.
I saw the ladder truck at Dunkin' Donuts, by the way. So it's just not high rise.
The sign is really, really tall,
Yeah.
so.
Tim?
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, the main thing I was going to do was bring that up also, and definitely say I'm in favor of having a fire service fee assigned to committee for discussion. The other question I had is looking here at the options for our immediate needs here, especially on the fire apparatus. Listing of short-term loans being one of the most highly recommended for the fire apparatus. Do we have any kind of estimate on the amount of fees or that would cost if we went in that direction? Or?
Not at this time, Commissioner. But certainly, that would be, as it says, a short-term loan is to sort of get us through the immediate. Mm-hmm. It is not a long-term fix to the problem that we need solved.
Right, definitely. Yeah. I'm thinking that the fire service fee could be definitely one of those more long-term solutions that would actually increase the amount of revenue we have towards fire service fleet. and then could also possibly take away some strain, moving other funds to regular fleet management too. But in the short term, I'd definitely be, as long as we're going to pursue the fire service fee, I'd be happy going short term, going with the loan option too.
Thank you. And my apologies if, for being late, but I kind of jumped ahead a little bit to slide 12. And I think comparing these two slides together, trying to get an understanding of like, particularly as it relates to these like calendar benchmarks, what of these projects kind of align with which of these, potential decision points? So for example, ARPA funding, would that be for some of the short-term needs, or would you all be looking to use those for some of the longer-term needs as well?
In particular, Commissioner, I think the ARPA fund discussion came up not only for the rescue truck that's on the agenda this evening, but also potentially for the ladder truck, given the fact that those funds are in high demand and not a long-term solution.
Okay.
And Commissioner, if I might, so I think it's been scheduled for January the 13th for you to have the next iteration of your ARPA process and funding discussion. And so I think that's really kind of a nod to that, as y'all try and figure out all the jigsaw puzzle pieces, what's possible. That's kind of the next waypoint on your ARPA discussion.
And then with TSPLOST, similarly, which projects would, given that it looks like that would be in June, would that be longer-term needs as well, or shorter-term?
So, and this was coincidence on our part, we didn't plan to come right before the TSPLOST committee presentation, but sort of on this slide here, we did submit both the fire and the central services department requests for TSPLOST funding that haven't made it through the advisory committee, but that funding would certainly solve some of the short-term, or was aimed to solve some of that short-term.
Okay, thank you. I missed that slide, so that's really helpful. And then I'd also like to say that I would be supportive of us pursuing a fire service fee as well. But I recognize that's not a short-term solution, and something kind of needs to happen in the meantime. But I think that can also address some of our longer-term concerns.
Any more questions about this before we move on to TSPLOST? All right. Captain, Gavin, thank you so much.
Thank you all
very much. And as noted earlier, we are going to talk about the candidate projects for TSPLOST 2023, which will be on the referendum on May 24th this coming year, coming springtime, for members of the public. As you know, with all of our SPLOST packages, we go through a couple of iterations of review, and so we are getting pretty close to having to determine what goes on the ballot. So I think we are going to have Lauren Blais, who's committee chair, talk through where they have come so far. So Lauren, thank you for coming down. Appreciate it.
All right, thank y'all. I'll just need a minute to set up here. Yeah. I'm just trying. Oh boy, not web development. Not the day job.
Just ask them
Probably doing it as a extended desktop.
Yeah, it's probably some of the desktop. Okay, sorry. Maybe I just slide. I think I just slide it over.
Yeah, you could do that, yeah, if you wanted to,
Let me just try me.
share your stuff. I need to plug it in before we do that.
Yeah.
If you want to try and plug in like a laptop.
It's working,
Yeah.
it's just showing it like off here to the side as a
Yeah.
second monitor.
what if I?
There you go. Oh, it's down?
Oh.
It was one direction when I saw it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
Oh, gosh. Oh, you know, let me go to the arrangement here. I'll actually bring this over. Sorry, I didn't expect it to go about it this way. Oh, wait, there it is. Okay. Actually, just mirror.
Yep. There you go.
All right, that's much better.
There we go.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
The digital connection.
Yes.
All right. Thanks,
Yes.
Lauren.
All right, good to see y'all. So, a work session in person. Oh, I am just thrilled to be here to see you all for this presentation of the TSPLOST 2023 Advisory Committee, and this is going to be our candidate project list. So the last time we met online, we presented our potential project list. It was 150% over the anticipated budget, and now this is whittled down to about 144.5 million. So this is your committee. We have continued to meet online over WebEx, but it has gone really well. And here we are again. There's 21 of us, and 20 of us were able to vote on the project, so it has been a highly participatory committee. And this is, of course, is our official charge. We're just here to receive, review, and recommend transportation projects to you all. Again, you all make the final decision, but we have sifted through the initial 91 projects, 87 project presentations, and come up with this lovely list. I'm going to break this down into some big ideas today. Of course, you have the priorities that the projects had to line up with, the triple bottom line. We talked about that the last time we met and presented the potential project list. So these are just some themes that have emerged with all these projects. So our big ideas are leveraging federal and state transportation dollars. Of course, that is extremely important now with the federal transportation infrastructure package, which I know we're all parsing, trying to figure out what exactly is going to come our way. So this is more important now than ever, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? Some other themes that have emerged are building safety and connectivity for people walking and biking along critical corridors and arterials. There's already people out there who are along the sides of roads every single day. Accelerating access to parks and schools for underserved neighborhoods. This is some great connectivity that got us really excited, a lot of potential here. And finally, hearing what communities want and provided the needed infrastructure. So not everything fits into one of these categories, but I'll go through them. This little background picture is, of course, Fowler Road Bridge, which is shut down. So some examples of projects that might leverage that are the live stream and culvert replacement project submitted by Transportation Public Works. And then Winterville submitted their Main Street drainage project, which we are simply calling Winterville Stormwater Replacement. And that picture in the background is an example of some stormwater issues, and the picture in the foreground was provided by Transportation and Public Works. A nice replacement there. And some more examples of projects that could leverage federal and state dollars are, of course, ACC Gov transit operations. That would be a continuation of fare free transit. Some more projects on here. Electrify the Fleet is still on here. Bridge improvement program. And this is not on this particular slide, but after looking at the memo about federal transportation dollars, it's possible that the Athens in Motion Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan bucket could leverage some of those dollars as well. So next big idea, safety and connectivity along our critical corridors. This is an example, Lexington Road bike and pedestrian improvements. We had a couple of Lexington projects. Of course, many, many social paths can be seen along this road. But besides Lexington, we have Atlanta Highway, West Broad Street. And I just want to remind you all that we have invested a tremendous amount of resources with our corridor studies looking at Lexington, Atlanta Highway. Of course, this is State Route 78. So we have tremendous potential to actually get some facilities and infrastructure on the ground where folks are already walking and biking as they go about their lives. In addition, Timothy Road, bike and pedestrian safety is on this list, and that is a minor arterial. And the next set of projects are some of the ones we were most excited about, and kind of in the foreground here is Sycamore Drive and some residents who live along there walking with their strollers. Some other examples, Gospel Pilgrim Cemetery Greenway Connector would connect the historic Black Cemetery to Walker Park. But there's so much more because Howard B. Stroud is on 4th Street, the Boys and Girls Club is on 4th Street. These two things, these two places, the cemetery and Virginia Walker Park, are right next to each other. They're just separated by the railway. And so this project would propose an underpass under the railroad. And the cemetery folks are happy or fine to have folks come through the cemetery. So that's one of the projects we're excited about. Another one that would provide connectivity is a back entrance to Sandy Creek Park off of Nowhere Road. Again, folks who live off Nowhere Road are geographically very close to Sandy Creek Park. And if we could just have a multi-use path and a parking lot as proposed by the folks who submitted this project, they could come into the park through that entrance. Beach Haven to Sycamore Drive Greenway. This would connect 3 important areas. I love this area because it really touches 3 districts. District 6, so that's Commissioner Houle. District 3, it's Commissioner Link. And District 10, that's Commissioner Hamby. So this would begin to build out our greenway along the Middle Oconee, which we haven't started. But most importantly, it would connect these neighborhoods that are, of course, again, very close to each other, but separated off. So Sycamore Drive used to be Epps Bridge Road. At the end of Sycamore Drive, you can see the original supports for the bridge that used to be there. And so if we can connect Sycamore to Beach Haven and then Forest Heights, Hampton Heights, Brooklyn, I mean, suddenly these areas are able to get to and from each other and versus like having to traverse Atlanta Highway. But hopefully we'll get some facilities along there too. But there's more projects than those in the picture. Of course, we have Firefly Trail subproject number 3 completion, which would give us a complete, I see it as a micro mobility highway from Winterville to Athens. And that project, along with the Lexington bike and pedestrian project, would really provide great connectivity because the Lexington project would connect into the Firefly Trail. So you could go from Gaines School, Cherokee, all the way into downtown on a separated multi-use path. And of course, we talked about Beach Haven, Sandy Creek Park, and then the Oconee Rivers Greenway, so building out that greenway along MLK Drive. There's that last little segment there that would be very meaningful. And then there's another wonderful project providing some connectivity to J.J. Harris Elementary School, which is really close to like the Pinewoods community in 29. But again, you have to go all the way down one road up 29 to get to it. And then Gospel Pilgrim and Fowler Drive pedestrian safety improvements as well. So the last big thematic idea that has come out of the projects that we have selected for the candidate project list is hearing our communities. And this is a big one for TSPLOST 2023 because most of our projects were submitted by people who live and work in Athens. Of course, it's great hearing from our staff. Our staff have long-term vision and perspective, but it's also wonderful to hear to our communities. And we have a great opportunity and responsibility to respond to these folks. So Westchester pedestrian improvements, this would be sidewalks along Westchester and Chalfont, so that's both, I think there's like 4 streets in here. There are 3 bus stops along Westchester alone. You can clearly see the social paths. And there's already a lot coming to Tallahassee in the way of connectivity soon, including we're redoing the bridge with TSPLOST 2018. There's money from SPLOST 2020 to start a multi-use path along there. So it's a great time. Another example of this is Old Elberton Road sidewalks. And what this project ultimately aims to do is to connect this one bus stop right here off Foyles Road to the school. Unfortunately, this bus stop was obliterated over the weekend by a driver. I was biking by with some friends and pointing out, like, oh, we're going to have potentially some sidewalks for parents who get off here at Route 30 for the north side circulator, but it's been obliterated. So, I think a sidewalk would be very meaningful. It doesn't solve some issues we have with needing to slow people down. That's another conversation for another time, right? But it does provide some infrastructure connecting this bus stop to the middle school in a meaningful way. Another example here in our communities, East Athens sidewalk improvements. There's quite a few projects from the East Athens neighborhood, but these are all very small projects in terms of their cost. So I think the most expensive one is this one. It's just under $1 million, but the rest are really just thousands of dollars. It's really not very much at all. Ultimately, all these projects bring sidewalks, ramps, crosswalks, lighting in the East Athens neighborhood. So again, hearing what our communities want and providing the needed infrastructure. Westchester, we talked about. Stonehenge also is on this list. North Athens, several projects from the North Athens area. So this is multiple neighborhoods made it on here, including the Old Elberton Road sidewalks. Also, Whole Road sidewalk improvements. I know someone who tried to run along that road recently. It was very precarious. So that would provide some great connectivity to Athens-Tech for folks who live along Danielsville Road, North Avenue, intersection of pedestrian safety. And then these projects from the East Athens neighborhood, again, there's quite a few listed here, but they're very small projects in terms of cost. So looking at the candidate projects as a whole, I want to go back to your list of important projects. This is same slide from last time, so that way you could make a comparison. I think the main difference here is that the West Broad and Hancock Roundabout did not make it to the final list, and then we voted to fund the alternate version of the transit operations, knowing that we would get some federal dollars, but still wanting to give local dollars, because the last I heard, our federal dollars was only going to be $24 million, and that would not fund fare-free transit. So it's the alternate is at $25 million here. Electrify the Fleet still on there, Firefly Trail still on there, of course, culverts and live stream replacement in the bridge improvement program. And then we feel like we did meet your request to provide projects in underserved areas, like the East Athens neighborhood, North Athens neighborhoods, and Stonehenge and Westchester Drive. There's another GIS map, and I'm just going to point it out, and we won't stay here for very long. This is available to the public, anyone watching. So this contains all the projects that were submitted to TSPLOST 2023, and if you want to see the most recent one, you will go all the way over to the right to candidate projects. And this is the disbursement if there is a specific location of those projects. And I will just mention to folks who are viewing at home, if you were looking at it on a small screen, you may see this little tab here with an icon, so you may have to click to see those candidate projects. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. It's all the way over there. And again, props to our GIS staff who have been able to get this out for us, so you can look at these projects by geographic area. and I probably should make this a little bit bigger. So there's your bike and pedestrian-related projects, public transit-related projects, and then roads, bridges, stormwater, and all that. So I won't go over that in much detail because you can look at that on your own, but I do want to point it out. Again, this is another slide that is similar to the last time we presented, and the one thing that has changed here is we didn't put on the neighborhood small sidewalk program submitted by Athens in Motion, and that would be a great thing to have, but with this TSPLOST, we just had so many wonderful submissions from the community that we felt like it was a great replacement for that kind of program. Ideally, it would be nice if we didn't have to have residents submit a TSPLOST project to ask for sidewalks, but because we had so many submissions, we felt like that we basically had a small sidewalk program thanks to the people who submitted projects in Athens. And of course, Athens in Motion is still on there as well. And then the one change here is, or the two changes is transit operations is at the alternate level, and then automobile extrication equipment replacement did not make it to our final list. This is really just a reference point, just so we had like one slide with all the projects on there and the amounts. So that's here, and I want to thank Keith Sanders with the SPLOST office, who put this together and organized this very nicely. And you can see that we had many, many community projects, and we wanted to honor those submissions as an advisory committee while still fitting in staff projects. Important dates. So where are we with this process? You all will have 2 public hearings coming up in January when you get back from your break. And in between those public hearings, the advisory committee for TSPLOST will have 2 public forums. We'll have one online, and that will be recorded. So the nice thing about that is we can send those out to the community. Folks can watch that in their own time. We are going to have an in-person public forum at the library. That's Thursday, January 13th. So we'll have those. And then you all will approve the final project list on February 1st and make the official call for the referendum on February 15th. And in between all that, you have the intergovernmental agreements that have to be made with Bogart and Winterville, so I didn't include those on here. But here, these are all the big, exciting, important dates. I want to thank the TSPLOST project submitters for the photography used in here, and Bike Athens as well. So thank you all. Time for questions, and I will take down the slide for now. I'll disconnect, and then if we need to pull it back up, we can.
All right, I'll get around to everybody. We'll just go around the room, starting with Mr. Thornton.
Lauren, I want to be the first one to thank you and your team for making this so diverse and hearing the voices of the community. I just glanced at, I'm sure somebody's going to have a complaint, but it won't be me. I don't think. But the needs are really articulated in the candidate projects, and I am going to look at it in more detail, but based on, and I do think this is for the county manager, that we just have to have a simpler process if we do this again, as far as involving the community. I do know some people who submitted projects, and this was the first time they ever did it, and they didn't make the cut. But the work that goes into this is humongous. So I hope we can talk about the process, in the future on involving community when we want to get input from the community. So, but I thank you. I see that the voices that spoke up were heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mike, did you want to?
No, I'm just real curious as to seeing how the public input plays out and where that leads us, because I think that'll be helpful in determining the list. I think you guys did some good work on putting this list together. And I watched some of the meetings, and you worked hard, and you did a good job of running the meetings.
You did.
I know that's
You did.
challenging.
Thank you.
But I do look forward to the public input. I would like to ask Manager Williams, though, we do have the final projection number of 140 million, just some, maybe it's not tonight, but at some point, keeping track of not keeping track, but maybe taking a second look at that projection and seeing if there's more dollars that may be projected for what we're trying to do here.
We can do that, sir.
I say that because I know when we looked at SPLOST dollars, we did that exact same thing, and hopefully we can, our sales tax dollars seem to be increasing each month, so anyway, thank you.
Thanks. Carol?
Thanks, Lauren. That presentation was really nice as well, so thank you, and thank everyone on the committee for all those hours and hours of work. I actually appreciate that, and I do, welcome the community input that we get, but having, worked with SPLOST projects in the past, I know the kind of time that all of you put into it, the members on there who see all the projects together. And I know in the past, some of it's been a popularity contest and sort of getting the more people out. And I really appreciate the thoroughness that everyone who was on that committee put into sort of evaluating and thinking about the projects. I do have a question, this is on that Beach Haven to the Sycamore Drive one. And I just want to clarify, does that include sidewalks? And this might be, someone can get it to you afterwards. This include sidewalks on Sycamore Drive?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Myers. It does.
Okay, that's really important there. And the difference between, there are 3 Lexington Road projects. Could you clarify for us the difference between those projects?
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a great question. I'll bring it back up the slide here. Wonderful, great. Okay, so there, as Commissioner Myers pointed to, there are 3 Lexington Road sidewalk, or there's 3 Lexington Road projects. Project number 73, which is Lexington Road Bike and Pedestrian Improvements, is the one submitted by Athens in Motion for a multi-use path on the north side of Lexington from Gaines School, Cherokee, and it would ultimately connect into the Firefly Trail some way. There's the GDOT project for the on-ramp is going on right now, so we'd have to coordinate and figure that out. It would also include design for a multi-use path from Gaines School, Cherokee out to Whit Davis. So we would go ahead and do the design portion there. Project number 54, Lexington Road Sidewalk Improvements, is sidewalk on the south side from about the GDOT project area to Gaines School, Cherokee. Now, this may be covered by TSPLOST 2018 funding and the GDOT project. So that's something that you all could check in with Transportation and Public Works with if we think that there's enough money from TSPLOST 2018 to have that covered. But if not, there's Project 54. Project number 4, Lexington Road Sidewalk Gap. Between Gaines School and Cherokee and Whit Davis, right next to Walmart, there's a community there. And there is a very small sidewalk gap. You'll know when you see it along the right next to the Walmart. So there was a resident here who lives next to the Walmart. And actually works at the Walmart, but they do not have a sidewalk to get there. And I'm actually, okay, I need to be on the other side of these trees.
Or for any of those people to do shopping.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, so it's along there, Commissioner. So thank you for asking about that, and happy to chat about that.
Thank you.
More.
Thank you. And I have actually a couple of questions for the staff to follow up with.
Yeah.
Manager Williams, in the email you sent us out, there was a pie chart in there for types of programs. And, I'm a big trail and bike pedestrian proponent. But I'd like to see that pie chart where it has bike, pedestrian, and the others. I'd like to see that for 2018, because it's a very large amount in this TSPLOST. And I'm not against that, but that's going to, kind of tying in with that previous discussion that we just had about the fire trucks, that if we have that all in the TSPLOST, we're going to have to find the funds over in other places, and I think that would be helpful to see the comparison. The other thing is I still think that this is for us a discussion of putting some of these projects into buckets because of the federal money that we may hopefully be getting from the infrastructure bill. And then that would allow us to move funds. Let's say we got money that would pay for all of the Lexington Road. I'm making this up. And we had a bucket, and then we can move it to North Athens or other places. So I think that's an idea to explore if we believe we're going to be getting some of that infrastructure bill that could be going for this, or transit or so forth. And the third thing I just want to say is hopefully for us, we're going to be voting on this on February 1st and February 15th. And I just wanted to clarify when we're going to have time for a discussion among ourselves that's not us voting for it the night of the voting. Can anyone help me with that one?
So this would be on the agenda in January, so we would have that opportunity as well.
But we wouldn't have, like, whatever we're going to be voting on, we don't have time to sort of like do any tweaking before it goes on to the agenda setting. That's just, it's something to follow up on.
What I'd anticipate is that we would engage with each other as a body over email.
Okay.
And, suggest, the kind of modifications that you're describing, to get to a final package. And anyhow, I'm glad we're having this conversation in mid-December and not mid-January.
So it would be a matter of working out commission-defined options then?
That's right.
And there wouldn't be another group discussion? Okay.
Well, that group discussion would be the agenda-setting meeting.
Okay. Got it.
Yep. Jesse?
I have a couple just kind of detailed questions for you, Lauren. Commissioner Blais, Athens in Motion Commissioner Blais. I know TSAC just sat through very long presentations and had lots of discussions. I'm wondering if you can just clarify kind of the thinking on a couple of these. First one that struck me was the historic district street signage being on there, but the staff proposal for replacing our existing street signage not making the list. Mm-hmm. And kind of what the thinking was there for prioritizing new signs. As I understand it, we kind of have a backlog on those other signs. Was there a reason why this was seen as like the bigger priority by TSAC members?
Again, so every project, there was no project that was voted off the list. We did rounds of straw polling for projects to end up on the list. So, it was round by round. And so, I'm trying to remember how much the street signage was.
Maybe a better way to word this,
Yeah.
instead of asking you to make a comparison that maybe wasn't made in the meeting, is
Mhm.
do you have a sense of why that project was seen as such a priority by the TSAC?
I don't, and I don't want to speak for the entire advisory committee. It ended up on the list. It was less than $100,000, so it's relatively inexpensive. One of the things that Tommy Valentine did bring up is that the first step in keeping a neighborhood together is to acknowledge that it exists. And he had given some examples of neighborhood structures that we have lost. But I can't speak to the advisory committee. We didn't discuss those two projects in comparison with each other.
Okay. And then the bike corrals, it's another small one, but I'm just curious, is there any funding contribution expected from CCSD or their TSPLOST to complement that?
None that I am aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then for the Atlanta Highway Corridor, because I know with all the different studies, it's been defined different ways at different times. What's the existing definition for that in this particular project?
So we are defining it as Atlanta Highway and West Broad Street. So that gives us a lot of options there. So we wanted to be clear on that. And GDOT is looking at this corridor. I participated in a roadway safety audit. So there's a lot of potential to leverage this funding for that entire stretch. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, would it include minor arterials or neighborhood streets that are adjacent to
I think this is
Atlanta Highway
solely
and West Broad?
along Atlanta
Okay.
Highway and West Broad Street.
Okay, thanks. And thanks for the, 15,000 hours you put in over the last 2 months, somehow making more time out of less time to bring this to us. My last question for now, I may end up with another one or two by the time we're done, if that's
Sure.
all right. But my last one for now is just, I'd like clarification from staff at some point sooner than later on where these figures come for the operational impact. I was struck by the seemingly larger sums for the Beach Haven, Timothy Road, and Firefly projects than the other ones, and just some rationale for that would be helpful. Thanks.
Tim?
Awesome. So yes, first, Lauren, thank you for all your work and everybody on the committee. And I want to specifically thank the District 5 representatives, Scott Long and Patrina Huff, for all their fantastic hard work on there. I have just, I guess just one question actually, and then a couple of comments. On the corridor improvements, I know Atlanta Highway and Lexington being on there. I wonder if you could speak at all to what the thinking was on those ones being prioritized and being put on there, but then the Prince Avenue and Jefferson Road corridor improvements not making the list. Whenever, yeah.
Yep, so Lexington and Atlanta Highway were up for consideration because we had done the Connect Athens corridor studies and because they're Tier 1. Of course, Prince Avenue is also Tier 1, but they had a bit more, I guess, we knew that they were going to submit some of their own projects, and so I think the committee did want to put these on there because there wasn't as much of it didn't seem like they were going to get organized to submit those themselves. And that, because they were still, of course, the committees, the user groups are charged with determining how TSPLOST 2018 money will be spent. So they are TSPLOST 2018 user groups for Atlanta Highway, for Lexington, even Prince Avenue. So the Athens in Motion Commission decided to submit those, knowing the importance of them because they show up in those corridor studies, because they are Tier 1 high priority in the Athens in Motion plan, and because they also had TSPLOST 2018 funding.
Okay. I appreciate the explanation there.
Sure.
And I think I do also support the bucket strategy, as Commissioner Myers brings up. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially since the infrastructure funding is so fluid and up in the air. But I think I support the same thing also, even for our corridor improvements. If we could somehow do it in a way where Jefferson Road and Prince Avenue could still receive some of this funding. Prince Avenue definitely having some, but Jefferson Road, which, you pull the crash data between 2015 and 2019, we've had 7 deaths there, pedestrian and automotive, and Old Jefferson River Road and stuff. We're seeing the other improvements come in there, but just connecting it. So I'd love to see us find a way to be able to have a corridor bucket improvement kind of thing that we can kind of pull from for all these different corridors. And my last comment is one to staff, to the manager's office. As we go into the holidays, where we're going to be digesting this information, trying to think of things, and another request I would have is an update exactly on road repaving and what is necessary there, what is still needed, just to have the most accurate numbers possible going into these holidays while all of us are considering this.
Thanks, Tim. Allison?
Yes, thanks again for your presentation, and all the committee members. I'm glad to hear your team is going well with this. A lot of hard work in here. Can you, and this speaks to what Tim said, and also Carol, I agree that we need to be talking in buckets so that we can be as versatile as possible. Pedestrian safety being, in my mind, a big bucket. And one of the projects that I thought pedestrian safety was the addressing, especially in the rural area, when somebody's mailbox is across the street of a very high-speed road. And so that was a specific project Did it get put into maybe a pedestrian safety bucket?
Commissioner Wright, do you remember what the name of that project was? Because I don't recall that specific project.
I don't know. Ovita, was it in one of the other topics? Maybe it didn't come forward as formally. So if it didn't come forward formally, that is a project that we've been talking about in our quarter.
I don't think it came through formally. I really don't.
So then this idea that I think is one of the ones that would be under the projects with multiple locations, that if there was a bucket under pedestrian safety, a project like that being approved and people needing money to have their mailbox moved to where their house is versus across the street, we would have ideas or topics that a bucket could be used for. So I'm also agree that I think the bucket strategy is going to help us because of the different areas that some of this can apply. Another thing is I'm not interested in us doing school district campus improvements. I think that maybe each of us could reach out to our school district representatives and talk to them about, if you're for this idea, let's get them using that in their buckets. Then the other thing, and what comes to mind with me in that is that's not even our property. So staff, I guess, Blaine, this is for you. If we could have, I would like to know what projects are right away. I mean, are we talking about projects here that might be somebody's, not even ours to plot, to make sure that we are going to get the right of way to do some of these things? Is there like, how do we process? I would like to be able to process that information with these details.
Sure. So, and not, I think that's the most recent example is the Firefly Trail to Winterville. So on trail type projects that are linear transportation projects, then, the acquisition of right-of-way does come after project concept approval and schematic design when they determine exactly the right-of-way that would be required to build the project. Of course, we have to come to y'all for permission to go ahead and try and negotiate those things.
All right, but the cost of that acquisition is not in these projects.
Well, we don't know what the acquisition would be, but I believe that there was some allocation made for right-of-way acquisition, yes.
Yeah.
So there's a plug figure, and we
Yeah.
hope that we'll get there with that.
The perfect example for those of you that have been around a while and it took a while to get improved, picture the fire station on Oglethorpe Avenue, and the sidewalk is going great on the side of the school, but one property owner, forever, it was an issue to get through there, and it has been resolved too. So I guess I'm just wanting to make sure that we're plotting areas that we have the right of way, or some areas there's a 2-foot right of way, but we're wanting 8 or 10. We need the construction right of way, but then we also need so.
Sure.
I think it's relevant.
Well, and so, for instance, with sidewalk, virtually most of the sidewalk can be placed on the right-of-way, but in most cases, we will need at least some temporary construction easements to build it.
Right.
And so there will be impacts to adjacent property owners, but, whether it's the acquisition of some necessary permanent right-of-way or some temporary construction easements, hopefully the goal of accessibility is of value to those property owners.
Yeah, okay. I've got some other questions, but I'll put that in an email so that it can be more processed.
Thanks, Allison. Melissa?
Yeah, I have, I share the concerns about the CCSD bike route project. I don't know that there's any potential for agreement with the school district for these kind of things. I don't know what kind of analysis has been done to determine, whether or not they'd be used from school to school. Considering that, cooperation with the school district has broken down in the past with other property concerns, I'm just kind of really antsy about a project like that. And also knowing that I'm not sure how many parents feel comfortable sending their kid to school on a bike if we have not improved sidewalks and bike lanes in the area. I think we should prioritize that first. I have real concerns about the West Broad roundabout being left off, and I'd like to hear some detailed information from staff about the repercussions of that as it relates to the remaining 2018 funding that has been set aside for that project. The idea was by funding that project with this bucket from TSPLOST, we would still have lots of money left over from 2018 to follow through with some of the internal neighborhood bike and pedestrian improvements that were envisioned in the West Broad feasibility study, for which there was like tons of community input. So I want to get a real clear idea of how leaving this off has repercussions for the neighborhood and the safety and traffic calming issues within the neighborhood, because there was a neighborhood traffic calming project proposed that didn't make it onto any of these lists. So it's a real priority, especially for the Hancock neighborhood. It's a real priority to get some of that traffic calming and sidewalk connectivity in that community. There's a lot of student infiltration in that neighborhood, and it's really making life miserable for a lot of folks who live there. I also am very, very concerned about Jefferson Highway. There's lots of fatalities. It's a growing area. We're going to see a neighborhood and shopping center out there. Not only that, but Jackson County right down the road is one of the fastest growing counties in the state. We've got lots of traffic coming down that highway into Athens. I think it is just absolutely crucial that we address safety on that highway. I know it's GDOT territory, but if we can't fund a study through this TSPLOST, I would ask that we reach into our budget and commit to a study for Prince Avenue out towards the county line to really address those safety concerns on that highway. It's really bad. I mean, it terrifies me to think people driving down that highway every day. And I had one more. Oh, College Square. I'm disappointed that, we're not having any suggestion for funding for this, but I also very much understand. I would like for us to take a look at our budget or maybe get real creative with potential funding sources to make that space an appropriate and inclusive urban public space. We have several corporate tenants on that space, so maybe we should go knocking on Chick-fil-A and Ben & Jerry's and Starbucks doors and do some community-wide fundraising as well. You go to other communities and you can't step on a brick without seeing somebody's name on it. So, I mean, perhaps we could have some kind of committee that starts that kind of conversation so we can get creative with funding that public space. We're going to have this beautiful Clayton Street. We should have a College Square that invites the whole community into it.
Thanks, Melissa. All right.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Lauren. I know you all put in so much work on this list, which I think is a really great list. I love to see so many community-driven projects on it. I know that, more than ever, perhaps, y'all received a huge volume of community projects, probably because people are becoming more civically engaged, and, you love to see that. So I'm really happy to see that effort that our neighbors have put into this list is reflected in the candidate projects here. Particularly in East Athens, there were a lot of projects, but there's a lot of need. And to that end, in our town hall that you were a part of, it was discussed the need for, I think, a community conversation around what equity really means. Like Commissioner Thornton said, there might be people who are mad, even though I think that this list is pretty equitable. And so having some sort of quantification of levels of investment historically, perhaps in previous TSPLOST, with breakdowns of what neighborhoods had neighborhood-specific projects. I think to explain to, our constituents, if someone says, well, there's no projects in our district, understanding that, well, there have been for the last, since TSPLOST began, that might help with some of the community input we have around what, the community conversation we're going to have around what equity means. On the topic of the CCSD project, I would agree. I think that if you look at some of the other park and the school access projects like the J.J. Harris connector, the Pilgrim Cemetery Greenway connector. These are, connecting schools to amenities in the community. So in a way, we are already investing in our young folks through, projects like those, and substantially so. So I would be happy to see that project, the bike corral project, deprioritized. And I think Melissa asked my question about the roundabout. I am very interested in understanding the budget ramifications for that, the plans we have, the existing plans we have for that project on it not being funded through TSPLOST. And then the last thing I want to say is just like kind of a note to the commission is I was looking at, thinking about Commissioner Hull's questions about the historic district street signage and thinking about historic neighborhoods in Athens that might not be designated historic district. For example, East Athens is a historic neighborhood that is not a historic district. And it is actively, speculators are coming in trying to rebrand it as Chicopee Dudley as gentrification advances there. And so I have already reached out to the project applicant to see if there might be historic neighborhoods that could be included in that, because especially ones that are being subject to gentrification, they're being lost really quickly. And it might be nice to honor that and, ensure that people know where they are when they're driving through certain places in town. But I think that's everything. I just want to, underscore finally that conversation around equity and trying to put some numbers around why certain neighborhoods might need more investment in others for folks who might not know them. I learned a lot about Westchester and Stonehenge through, Commissioner Hull and learning about this. People might not know about East Athens or North Athens, so figuring out how to express to the public how equity has factored in here, either quantifiably or through some other means.
Thanks, Mariah. Patrick?
Oh, I have no questions.
All right, thanks. All right, everybody, I appreciate a round. I'll ask for kind of any additional input over the course of just the next couple of minutes. Obviously, we've got a lot of time to interact around this, so I'll get to folks who've got some additional short-term input. Couple just observations in terms of the package and its composition. And one of the things I'll be looking for from staff is some interaction between these transit funds and our transit development plan. I mean, certainly among the things that I'm hoping to see out of transit is not only the route extensions we've spoken about, but frequency increases in some of those key corridors like Atlanta Highway, Lexington Highway, and Prince, so that we're getting to a 15 or 20-minute headway on some of those key routes. So I just want to make sure how much of that we can do. I'll embed that in an email. And then I think it's come up a couple of times, there is the question of our commitment to road quality and road paving. That's an unsexy element of our infrastructure maintenance, but I'll say it's a necessary one. Our buses ride on those, our school buses, us as individuals in many cases. So I'll want to make sure that over this next 5-year horizon, we're not underfunding those needs. Just to give you a real world snapshot of, say our even our existing package, our 2018 package versus those of a lot of other communities, we are funding a much higher proportion of transit and multimodal access, bike and ped, than other communities. So, I would promote that some level of LMIG match is necessary. And then what I'll be asking of staff also is some other potential funding sources for some of the projects that you see on this list, whether that's tax allocation district areas that could potentially be a matcher of these, or what we know so far about federal infrastructure dollars. Obviously, we want to leverage all of these to the greatest degree possible. And what's good is that we've got a deck full of lots of different funding prospects, but we want to make sure that none of this is underfunded. So we've got just a few minutes before we take a break, but we'll want a quick second round. Mike?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And appreciate the direction you're heading in, but also am interested too in the bucket approach. I think, over the commission time that I've been on it, you see the changes that come and go and the needs that come and go. But I will caution that if we do a bucket approach, then we need to make sure that the work that the committee did in looking at some specific areas. So I could see maybe our attorney putting together some language that says, for maybe pedestrian or something like that, this bucket of money could include improvements to Prince Avenue, to Jefferson, to Atlanta Highway, this bucket of money shall include improvements to East Athens, with these priorities or something like that. So that it makes it specific but broad, if you see where I'm going with that, so that people to address Commissioner Parker's concern and Commissioner Thornton's about making sure that people see the equity, and if they see their street listed, and they know that something is happening from that standpoint. So I will be very much interested too in the other funding sources. I know, we did do all these TADs, so there's some TAD dollars out there, but I also know specifically too on Atlanta Highway, a lot of redevelopment's occurring, and that redevelopment will trigger sidewalks being built along Atlanta Highway. So there is that part of it as well. I think that's all for now, but I will be interested to see if staff could come back with a tweak in the numbers to reflect a higher number of receipts from the TSPLOST sales tax. And I'll say this, y'all, this is the second TSPLOST that we've been through, so it's been a really helpful tool for our budget and for the community in addressing some of our transportation needs. So thank you.
Again, thank you, Lauren, for the good work in the committee again. And only thing I think when District 9 was meeting with staff, the discussion about buckets came up. And I think exactly what Mike is saying, that if it's worded right, like such as, or, example, I think, am I right, Keith, that there's a way we could word it that people still see their project, but broad enough that we can move money if need be. So I do support a bucket concept, and I think that does give us a little bit more flexibility. My next question was, well, that was a statement, but my question is for projects that did not make the list because they were all so good. If there are other dollars, do they get a chance to get back on the list? No?
No, that made me think of something. I was raising
my do they get a chance to get back on the list?
If we decide that. So like in Mike's scenario, like let's imagine $5 million more were projected because we'd refined our estimates of future year tax growth, then we would determine, do we want to increase the existing projects? Do we want to add some? That's part of the interaction now.
Well, I mean, these are recommendations, so the commission has the prerogative to make whatever decisions they would like in determining the final list.
I really strongly think that, and this is one of my future visions of this process, I think all districts should be able to point to something on the list that says this is what I'm paying my penny for. And I know that's a future thing, or maybe a future thing, but that has been my my point forever. I think even though I advocate for District 9, I want to be able to advocate for District 5, for everybody if possible. So that was my point there.
Thanks. Carol, any follow-up?
Yeah, just following up on the bucket idea to clarify what I'm thinking as well as we're starting to think about this. I wouldn't want to make the buckets, the buckets themselves can be broad or narrow. And if you had a North Athens, neighborhood bucket to include, and the description said to include intersection and pedestrian safety, Hull roads, whatever, and all the lists in there, and in addition to other projects identified if budget funds become available, or if the budget allows. And that way, let's say there's, manna from heaven because ARP, the federal funds come in and pay for something else, then if there was a project that fit in that area, it could be added in. So that's just to clarify the direction that I'm thinking about in terms of those buckets. And that's and I think that addresses, Lauren, when I brought that up before, it's different than just saying a bucket for Athens in Motion projects. So we could specifically name these projects and they wouldn't necessarily be lost in the shuffle there.
Jesse, follow-up?
Yeah, I'll try to go quick here. I got two quick requests, a question, and a thought for colleagues. So my requests are, I would like to request the agenda-setting team, Mayor Gertz, Manager Williams, and Russell, to allot some time for us to discuss this again in person, even if it's maybe before our agenda setting next month. But I think that we have a much more productive conversation in person, and I also think it's a lot more transparent than what is happening by email. So for the benefit of the public and ourselves, I think giving ourselves time to discuss this again before we're hashing it out in that meeting would be helpful. And I'd also like to ask, I don't know if this would be for staff or maybe for you, Commissioner Parker, if you're talking to the applicant, but regarding that historic signage project, I'd like more info on how far the money will go. It's a modest sum, but it is the full amount they requested, and as we know, a lot of people ask for the moon in hopes of getting somewhere in the atmosphere. So maybe like a pilot would cost a bit less, as well as some more clarity on which places this would apply to and how those will be prioritized.
Yeah, it does list the 17 current historic districts, but it does mention also having funding for future ones, so it does sound kind of like they're shooting for the moon a little bit.
And yes, I'm curious with that, does 95K get us all 17 of those neighborhoods and some more? Does it only get us half? What does it do?
Yeah.
Thought for colleagues on the buckets. Love the buckets idea. My thought on how we do well to approach it is to add new things that we call buckets, where we maybe call out specific projects that could be included, as well as, list a few projects and then say to augment these projects and/or to help in this broader fashion. But I'm really hesitant for us to just squish together a bunch of unique projects right now. I feel like that is unlikely to translate well to how the public and the project submitters will view it. I think it's also easy for us and staff over years to have our institutional memory get fuzzy and not necessarily fully fund the things that everyone up to this point is expecting to be fully funded. So if we're doing buckets, which I love, I think adding them and maybe shaving a small percent off of the projects we call out in them would be a good way to go. And then my last question is just for you, Lauren, if you may. We had 3 projects that we gave to y'all, and as I understand it, we had 3 projects on our list of initial asks for consideration that y'all removed: the pavement maintenance, West Hancock Roundabout, and College Square. And I'm curious if you could just share any overarching brief thoughts you have that reflect the committee's thinking on why those were removed,
So,
and how they anticipated us potentially funding them instead.
So again, for clarity, we didn't remove any projects. Projects had to be voted on. And then it's difficult to speak for a 21-member advisory board, so I have to be really kind of careful about my comments, and I don't want to misrepresent anyone's thoughts.
No doubt.
Pavement maintenance was just such a huge bucket, and we had so many projects this time around. Again, we had 91 submissions, and we reviewed 87, and we knew that some money was coming, and so I think the committee was hoping that you all might have more information than we did and have other ways to fund that. Again, pavement maintenance, the original ask was $72 million, which would have been half of the TSPLOST budget. And they submitted a $37 million ask. I think some of the committee members for College Square downtown recognized that a lot of money had been spent downtown and really wanted to prioritize neighborhoods a bit more. I think that I can say that, and that many would agree with that. And College Square, they requested, I think about $8 million was the original ask, and did not submit an alternate at all. So we had to either the committee chose 8 million or did not choose to put it on the list. And then the last one, I'll pull this up.
The Hancock Roundabout.
Yes, okay, the Hancock Roundabout. It did not make it on the list. I will say if there's any high priority, if there's any roads along West Broad or along in the West Broad community that are on the Athens in Motion plan, those could come up for consideration for funding from that bucket. And I don't remember, I haven't had a chance to look to see what roads in that community may be identified as Tier 1 high priority in the pedestrian master plan. But that's something that Athens in Motion would look into.
Tim, any follow-up?
So my last follow-up is expanding my previous request where I talked about the road repaving. What I would love to see is the priority projects that didn't get selected by the TSAC, for staff to identify any potential alternative fundings that we have there also, along with that, such as College Square, maybe looking into the SPLOST 2005, other T-SPLOST 2018, any funds that might be left over, anything else, basically just so we can be as informed as possible as we try to find money for all those other projects.
Thanks, Tim. Any follow-up, Allison?
Yeah, I was questioning or looking deeper into 21. It's described as Greenway Trail Safety, 1.7 million, and it's described in the chart as the location is downtown business district. So I was trying to put that together. And when I looked it up, it's Old Commerce Road. So I think the chart should maybe be updated because it made me think it was a something downtown, but it's Commerce Road. So on the chart, that just popped out at me. And then the other thing about the anticipated revenue, currently we are averaging 2.5 million a month in pennies brought in. And so that was the question I was going to head at, as to when you guys give us the feedback about the anticipated revenue that we're talking about, that would be a checkpoint in the per month thing for me to understand, because so that we can address that. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison. Any follow-up, Melissa?
I don't think so.
Okay. Mariah?
I guess I'll echo what Commissioner Lee was saying earlier about the downtown, the College Avenue Square project. I think we could privately fundraise for that and find other sources of funding. But the other question kind of was drawing off what Commissioner Denson was saying about alternative sources of funding, and I think Commissioner Myers also brought up the infrastructure package earlier. We've been talking about that a lot as like this backup plan for a lot of things. So I wanted to ask Mayor Gertz and Manager Williams if any addition, I mean, if people think the local government moves slow, the federal government, that's a lot to handle, especially when things have to come through the state first. And so I wanted to ask Manager Williams and the mayor if there was any additional information put out about what things are going through the state or coming directly to Athens, because that might influence the timelines of when those funds become available for certain things.
Well, the latest information is Commissioner Myers shared a document from the Georgia Municipal Association that talks about the different types of things that are available.
Yeah, and I saw that.
And we are trying to learn more about what would be specific to Athens-Clarke County.
Okay, so we're still there.
Just
Okay.
as sort of a parallel in terms of what you're describing, Mariah, so ARPA passed in March, and here we are sitting in December, and we still have interim final guidance
Exactly.
on ARPA. So,
Exactly.
it would suggest that maybe we'll be looking at next June before we get some kind of final guidance around infrastructure.
Okay.
It does occur to me that the infrastructure package is much more routed through state entities rather than directly to localities. So.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Patrick, anything else?
Just thank staff and TSAC for all the hard work. I guess I'm the only one on the fence with the buckets, but I'm easily persuadable.
All right. Lauren, thank you a ton for your highly paid work here this evening, and please pass along the same to the 21 members of the body who I know reviewed over 90 projects.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gertz. All I want is $144.5 million for transportation infrastructure, if you can help with that.
I mean, it's that time of year. Secret Santa's up.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. All right. See y'all soon, and we will have our public forum soon, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you much. Look for the
Thank you.
IOU under the tree.
All right.
All right, everyone, we'll take a 10-minute break and see you back here for agenda setting.